Okay, can you hear me all right? Okay. Well, this is very exciting. Welcome everyone to Food Fix, a conversation and call to action around the Twin Cities food justice landscape. I'm Jennifer Tashney with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet and Consociates, or CSJs, and I'm honored to welcome you and our panelists on behalf of our sponsors, the Sisters of St. Joseph and St. Catherine University, and our planning committee, which includes students, faculty, staff, and leaders from the CSJs, St. Catherine and Hamline Universities, and Appetite for Change. A few notes about technology and accessibility for tonight's program. We have 2 ASL interpreters with us. We're grateful for their presence. Please send a chat message to ASL interpreter if you are in need of their services. We are also using English captions today, so feel free, you'll see those on the bottom of the screen. Feel free to remove those captions if they are not helpful to you by clicking on the bottom of your screen, the 3 dots where it says more, and then you can click on hide captions. Many resources will be shared tonight during this program, and we will be collecting those resources on a resource page that we will send out to all participants in a follow-up email. The host will keep everyone muted as we have a very large group tonight and we want to hear the presenters clearly. So when it is your turn to speak, please unmute yourself and then remember to mute yourself again after speaking. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet and Consociates and St. Catherine University share the mission of moving always toward the profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction. We partner to address food insecurity in and beyond St. Kate's through the Food Insecurity Project, our St. Kate's CSJ food shelf, and in our community gardens, where we grow and aggregate sustainably raised produce and build resilience and community through nutritious food. Student interns from St. Kate's and our St. Joseph Worker Volunteer play a prominent role in our food access and urban agriculture operations. They and St. Kate's professors and staff enhance the work with expertise from their fields of study in public health, nursing, social work, nutrition, biology, and occupational therapy. The student interns will host tonight's conversation. Additionally, we partner with area colleges, Hamline and Augsburg, through our collaborative Food Fellows initiative to learn from one another how to best address food insecurity on campuses and to collaborate on upstream solutions to this growing problem. The interns and food fellows developed the pre-advisory video you received upon registering. In planning this event, we extended collaboration beyond religious and academic institutes to a local nonprofit social enterprise organization, Appetite for Change, where food is a tool for building health, wealth, and social change in North Minneapolis. Building collaborations across sectors enhances the knowledge and perspective we bring to food access work. It increases relationships with diverse groups, and it allows for greater impact. This conversation tonight is inspired by the themes in Dr. Mark Hyman's book, Food Fix: How to Save Our Health, Our Economy, and Our Communities, and Our Planet, One Bite at a Time. And also inspired by the great work being done here on these issues in Minnesota. So our panelists tonight work locally with food and the environment, or regenerative agriculture, food and agricultural policy, and food and mental health, or food as medicine. One of our panelists, Rehi Haslett-Meraquin, is prominently featured in the book for the regenerative agroforestry systems that he models in Northfield, Minnesota. I know many of us here tonight have had the privilege of visiting Rehi's farm. A focus on food alone will not bring about all the changes needed to adequately improve the health of all people and our planet, but our work with food can help build a healthier community and healthier communities, and can repair harm caused by extractive agricultural practices. we can build communities of care around food. Tonight, we will learn more about the great work that our panelists are engaging, and we'll consider how collaboration, advocacy, and broader engagement in this work is possible. At this time of great challenge and pandemic, violence, racism, climate change, economic instability, we can actively build or regenerate healthy land and communities through our actions around food. We must. We hope that tonight inspires you to engage in our food system in enhanced and active ways. And now I invite our community leader intern, Ellen Heastan, to share a land acknowledgement statement.
We begin our program with honor and respect for Indigenous people and the land. People, specifically the Wapikuti and Oceti Sakowin, along with the Anishinaabe and other Native communities who have a long history, past, present, and future, with this sacred land. We desire to honor and respect the Indigenous people and recognize their caring for our common home. We, both personally and institutionally, continue to have a deepening awareness of our complicity of the complex history of colonialism and broken treaties. We seek to understand the troubled acquisition of this land by unjust US government practices, including the stealing of these lands and the forced removal from the birthplace of the Dakota people without any compensation to the Native communities. We acknowledge the past, current, and future impacts of this history on our relationship with our Native sisters and brothers. In our commitment to social justice and the love of dear neighbor without distinction, we are called to acknowledge and to deepen our understanding of our participation in interlocking systems of oppression. We seek to journey farther together to respond boldly in working toward dismantling them. We, St. Catherine University and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet and Consociates, know that these words are inadequate, imperfect, and must extend beyond this verbal acknowledgement. This is only our beginning of a much larger journey of listening, learning, building relationship, and advocating for and with Native nations for a more just world for all. Now I will invite Karina to share a reflection.
Thank you, Ellen. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here with all of you tonight and to just prepare us for an evening of invigorating conversation. I would like to share a poem to help ground us in this atmosphere that we will be creating. So this one is called Magnificat by Christina Hutchins. What shall I do with this quiet joy? It calls forth the expanse of my soul, calls it forth to go singing through the world, calls it forth to rock the cradles of death gently and without fear, to collect the rain in my hands and spill it like laughter, calls it forth to touch and carry her suffering, his age, our dense flesh, to bear into the world a place where light will glisten the edge of every wing and blade of grass, shine along every hair on every head, gleam among the turnings of every wave, glorify the turning open of each life, each human hand. Now I'd like to invite Erica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica, and also very excited to be here tonight. I'm going to walk us through a poll and some questions to have a greater understanding of who we have here tonight and where people are coming from. So first, I'm going to pull up a poll. And the question of this poll is going to be, what role best describes you? And you can pick multiple roles. And additionally, if none of these roles are what you would say describes where you're coming from, go ahead and pop it in the chat. And I'll leave this up for about a minute, and then we'll see what we've got going on. So on my end, I'm seeing lots of CSJ community members and many food justice advocates and community gardeners. Leave it up for just a few more seconds. Try and get your answer in there. Okay. All right. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see the results? Good. Okay. So this is where we have people, roles that we're coming from today. You can see our partner schools are here with us from Augsburg and Hamlin, and many CSJ members and community gardeners and food justice advocates. Okay, and so secondly, I'm going to ask that individuals, if you're comfortable in the chat, put the city that you're coming from and your relationship to the earth. So an example of mine would be, I'm coming from Eau Claire, Wisconsin tonight. We're on spring break at St. Kate's. So, and then my relationship with the earth would be that the earth for me creates community, healing, and energy. So again, if you could send in the chat your name or where you're coming from, and then also what your relationship with the earth is. And I'll just name some off as we, Ray, he said Northfield. I am indigenous to the earth. I am related to all life. Oh, I love that. St. Paul, sustainer and healer. Minneapolis, the earth is my turf. Like that. Emporia, oh, cook from the earth. St. Paul, Minneapolis. Oh, Claire is coming from Chile. Claire is in Arkansas. That's awesome. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Honolulu, gardener. Wow, our branches are extending everywhere. Wonderful. Okay, and go ahead and just keep sending those answers in. Before I pass it off to another St. Kate's student, I'm just going to give you guys an agenda of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to have a panel discussion for about 45 to 50 minutes. Then we're going to have some advocacy pieces that we can talk through and a short Q&A. And then we'll have a closing reflection to wrap everything up. So awesome, seeing many more great places that people are coming from. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Clara for the panel discussion, and Clara is our NIFA fellow.
Thanks, Erica. So moving into the panel discussion, we will hear from our three panelists this evening, which in order will be Reihi, then Valentine, then Princess. And throughout the discussion, please send questions in the chat, which we will address in the Q&A session. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Reginaldo Hazlitt Marroquin, who began working on economic development projects with Indigenous Guatemalan communities in 1988. He served as a consultant for the United Nations Development Programs Bureau for Latin America and as an advisor to the World Council of Indigenous Peoples. He was a founding member of the Fair Trade Federation in 1994, where he founded and directed the Fair Trade Program for the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy and founded Peace Coffee, a key program outcome. Before coming to the U.S. in 1992, Reihi worked with artisan communities across the highlands of Guatemala and built fair trade networks in Europe, the U.S., and Canada. Reihi built programs for woodland owners in the Midwest. Reihi was also named one of the Twin Cities International Citizens of the Year in 1996. In 2008, he received both the Northfield and College City and Southern Minnesota District Service to Mankind Awards. He has served on numerous nonprofit boards, including the North Country Development Fund, currently Shared Capital Cooperative, the National Area Foundation, the Northfield Area YMCA, and the Conservation Corps of Minnesota and Iowa. He is the current Moses Border VP, Midwest Organic and Sustainable Education Service. Reihi is an owner, founder of Regenerative Farms, and founder and president of the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. Rehi was awarded a prestigious Lifetime Ashoka Fellowship in 2018 for his work in regenerative poultry systems, which is at the center of a multitude of national and international initiatives. This system is designed to be uniquely aligned with the social and economic conditions of new immigrant small farms and marginalized communities. The system is designed for large-scale and global impact. At the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, Rehi works on system-level strategies designed for global application. Currently, his work covers communities in the US, Hazelton, British Columbia, Mexico, and Guatemala. Rehi received his agronomy degree from the Escuela Nacional Central de Agricultura, studied at the University de San Carlos de Guatemala, and graduated from Augsburg University in Minneapolis with a major in International Business Administration and a minor in Communications. Rehi currently lives and farms at Salvatierra Farms, a 75-acre family farm home to free-range chicken and eggs. In Northfield, Minnesota, with his wife Amy and their youngest son Lars DeCarlo. The farm is being built to further advance Rehi's work in regenerative poultry, to demonstrate his system and to pivot regional and national conversations in adoption of regenerative poultry. Their other children are William and Anna Nicte, both living in California. Most recently, Rehi authored In the Shadow of a Green Man, My Journey from Poverty and Hunger to Food Security and Hope. It can be ordered from the publisher, acreusa.org, Amazon, and numerous other booksellers. As Jennifer mentioned, Rehi is also highlighted in Food Fix for his approach on agriculture that is ecologically, economically, and socially viable. Rehi, thanks again for joining us tonight. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit more about your work and experience related to regenerative agriculture.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Clara and Jennifer and Erica and Alan and everyone here for this opportunity. More than give you a technical description of what we do as a team, as teams, networks of teams, I will focus on a reflection on what defines the ancestral concept that has been protected and preserved for thousands of years by indigenous communities across the world that we now is being called regenerative. And so, first of all, Claire, if you would just let me know how many minutes do I have right now?
10 minutes, I believe.
8. Okay. So we're going to go through two things. Say that again?
Sorry, I think 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to show you a quick meditation that I have written for any gathering like this, where regenerative agriculture is at the center of the conversation. And this was done first at the Bionutrient Food Association gathering in February at the opening of a year-long conference. So this is a regenerative food systems meditation. Is to be used for ceremonial purposes as a mental decolonization exercise. This is original writing. I wrote this, but it doesn't belong to me or anyone specifically. This belongs to the community of people willing to embrace ways that transform the way we think, know, act, learn, teach, live, so that we may achieve a regenerative future. So use this as you wish. I will make it available to the conference organizers so that they can distribute. And it will be used at the ceremonial dedication of Salvatierra Farm on May 1st this year as we start the season. We will do this with the indigenous leaders, spiritual leaders from the Mayan community in the United States and from indigenous and native leaders from this part of the world. Basically, when we gather, we must gather as creatures indigenous to the earth. We gather to claim our roots and to realign our bodies, minds, and spirits with the elements of the earth, the source of our energy and the foundation of our being. We recognize that independent to our individual and collective beliefs, traditions, and ways of being, which are defined by our cultures, native lands, struggles, and successes, we are at the end simply highly organized forms of energy that came to be because of the magnificent process of evolution. And so the meditation goes. I'm not going to read through all of this because it takes just about 10 minutes, but I want to finish by just reading what we are committing to. We commit as regenerators, we commit to safe spaces for all expressions that seek to find their path to indigenization and decolonization to find a home. We commit to peace, tolerance, and to focusing on the common goals and objectives while recognizing that we are there are unique individuals and organizations and that we also have differences. We commit to letting those differences also be expressions of our collective diversity and to support each other as much on the common areas where we will seek collective impact as in our individuality so that everyone feels validated, welcome, and supported. So I'll stop that sharing there and I'll make the whole meditation available. The reason I read this, and I'm gonna read another, I'll give you another decolonization and indigenization exercise. So this is like a mantra to start thinking about health and food and how health and food, our health and the sources of our food is simply not the result of farmers producing it. It's the result of how we structured our communities and our society, government, and so on. And so to decolonize your mind and to indigenize your ways, think, if you're a farmer, think not as a producer anymore, but as a steward of energy transformation, for we don't produce things. We simply harness the energy of the earth and steward it from non-edible forms into edible forms, from CO2, ammonia, and nutrients into carrots and chickens and eggs. We don't produce any of that. We simply steward the process by which that energy, which is endless, cannot be destroyed and cannot be created. We inherited that energy. And as farmers, we're simply stewards of that energy transformation. When we see ourselves like that, we will produce food with integrity that is good for everyone, for everyone's health, for the animals, for the earth, for the microbes, and for the plants. If you are in the capital sector, engage money, but not as an extractor of wealth no more. Be a partner and an ally so we may all benefit from the wealth we collectively create. If you are in an organization and you work for justice and equality, be a savior no more. Be an insurgent in your own colonized world and transform it from within. If you buy food, be a consumer no more. Be a steward of your body, mind, and spirit, and let those principles guide your shopping every day so that you can become part of regenerating the planet and saving us from total collapse. Now, the reason I read those two things, and I wanted to meditate with you on these concepts, is because that is the foundational, those are the foundational principles on which we have now designed the regenerative engineering processes that allow us to be effective stewards of energy as we seek to build a healthier food system. So when we think again about our health, our bodies and our mind and our spiritual health, no longer think of it as the result of reaching out to farmers and narrow ways that we seem to reduce things to. Think of it more holistically. The food that arrives on your table is the result of a very long process where stewards must be held to much higher standards. This is why we should have never allowed food to be corporatized. We should have never allowed food to be part of extraction of whether it's cheap labor and the value of workers or the extraction of the nutrients and the energy that belongs to all of us and the capitalization of that energy, the patenting of that energy, the species that evolved over time. We should have never allowed that. If we are unhealthy as a society, And if we are obese and suffering from all of these food-related diseases and so on, it is because we built a system that delivers exactly that. It is not natural. It is manufactured. This is why we need a regenerative thinking, but a regenerative system. But a regenerative system is not what you normally hear in brands and claims or products out in the market. A regenerative system, from the ancestral understanding of what it means, simply is. It cannot be defined. It can only be done. It can only be exercised. It can only be shared, and it simply is. A farmer is either regenerating or is not. Labeled or not, certified or not, it doesn't matter. That's who we are. That's what we do. And that's what I wanted to share with you. Again, we are centered on poultry because it gives us the largest potential global impact and an entry-level point that allows us to be fully inclusive of all individuals and all kinds of farmers, especially immigrant families. But it is, the chicken is simply a tool. It's simply an instrument. It's simply a strategy to achieve a graded outcome, which is regenerative. Thanks.
Thank you, Reiki, for that rich meditation and reflection on like returning to our returning and indigenizing our food systems. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will refer to them in our Q&A. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome Valentine Cadieux. Valentine spends most of her time strategizing and learning with urban food growers in the Twin Cities, including Urban Farm Garden Alliance, the Twin Cities Community Agricultural Land Trust, and with various circles of learners, including at her day job teaching community food systems and environmental justice and sustainability at Hamline University. As an artist, learner, grower, neighbor, and peacemaker, Valentine is focused on mending, especially in spaces of urban community economic resistance, reimagination, and repair of land relationships. Commons and cooperative economic relationships are the center, including community-led education of policymakers and peer-to-peer support, and systems change and code switching translation work between community wealth as understood in our communities, conversations in the regional economic development as described in the language of people in the power. Valentine, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm wondering.
What did you just say? Sorry.
Welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. I am excited to hear and wondering if you can share with us more about food and agricultural policy.
I am happy to, and thank you so much. I'm going to seed a conversation tonight using Reiki's words about how we repair what we should never have allowed, which is turning our relationship with land into property from which value is extracted. So I'm planting the seeds of discussion around community guardianship of land. And as Clara's introduced really nicely, a lot of my work is with some community groups that I'll describe a little bit. But most of what I want to share tonight is wholehearted gratitude for being able to be alongside such amazing mentors and colleagues dedicated to regenerative and healing relationships around community food. I want you all to appreciate the community we get to live and work amidst as we figure out what we all have to offer to live up to this beloved community. So I've pulled from a paper that we put on a table in a community meal, this scrap that seemed food is medicine, this idea about I'd rather spend money on good food now than spend money on pharmaceuticals later. Food is tastier. From a community meal at the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance's annual Greens Cook-Off a few years ago. And I'd like to start with these mentors that I've gotten to work with on the right, Setu Jones and Public Art St. Paul's community meal, on the left, the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance. And as a reflection, I thought that Food is Medicine was a really nice summation of the whole Food Fix book. And for those of you who've been reading and engaging with this, it's a really overwhelming read about all the things that are wrong with the food system. And I think my general call to action is there's a farm bill coming up. we really all need to work on what we have learned about what has happened, especially during COVID, where food security issues have come to the surface that many people knew were there, and many more people are able to see what has happened, and also the amazing mutual aid networks of people who are feeding each other. And to be able to advocate for what has worked and what still needs to happen as we recover from this. And as I move, I'm going to share some pictures of our community and the things that we do. We have here Tim Page as one of the judges of the Community Greens Cook-Off. What he's doing there is tasting 13 different kinds of greens that come from different gardens. And you see behind him some of the different people who steward some of those gardens. And I'm going to point out Mark and Adrian Hannard are sitting behind him. They're a great example of family in the community who have some land, and they think that land should belong to the community. So they've been working with the community for years now, with the Rondo Land Trust and other community land trusts, to ask the question, how could this land be held and guarded by the community? How could there be a reciprocal relationship between the community and that land in the long term? So this is what I spend my time on. But before I kind of go more deeply into that, which we can have a conversation about, a couple of things came to my mind as I read through Food Fix. As we walk this path of a conversation about rebuilding land relationships, there are some ditches that we risk sliding into. Right before this conversation tonight, I got an email from a large network of people being like, this land reform the current government is thinking about, are they taking farms away from us? And it brought me into this whole rabbit hole of YouTubes of people who are holding on to this really colonial system in which well over 99% of the country's farmland is held by white farmers. And there's an antagonistic narrative of them against us, of efforts, for example, to help secure land for smaller farmers or for BIPOC farmers, or to help restore some of the land stolen from indigenous farmers. And so there are some, I think, before we have a conversation about how we rebuild land together, part of the conversation we need to have is how we relate to land now. And land was not a huge theme. It's underlying everything in the Food Fix book, but there are a couple themes that really relate to the way that we hold land. And one of them is about control. And I think control is often a way that we respond to anxieties about loss or impurity or contamination. And there's a real sense of people's sense of control in the way that they are concerned about their diets. And perhaps more complexly, there was a real concern about redemption, which I've been mulling on, and I see it as potentially a response to the need to fix, like this idea of the fear of facing harms that we bear responsibility for, but we don't know how to repair. And so instead, I'd like to propose that we consider in ourselves and our communities transforming the motives of control and redemption toward accountability, toward our shared ecologies, our social and more than human ecologies, the ecologies of our existence, including our nourishment, ecologies that we in turn nourish to be resilient and regenerative enough to face what's difficult, to heal the relationships that our ability to eat rests on, and to be willing to inhabit a new system that we're bringing into being while hospicing the dying system via just transitions that don't leave our brothers and sisters in the crappy jobs of the status quo food system. So that's a lot, but I also think that they're all things that we know. And when we get together in that time that we have had and we will have again soon where we can eat together, we often, in my world, I'm reminding you of all the marker and papers that we often use when we're together in spaces working our way through things. And these are images that we worked on before COVID of thinking about the food system. What's good and what's bad in the food system, and what's easy and hard to talk about, and what's important. And one of the things as we did this is it's always really hard to talk about the important things that are going wrong. So just as kind of like a joyous invitation to thinking about this, I want to share something that's a series of photos from some public art projects that I've had the honor to be involved in, because one of the points in Food Fix is that when things are hard and complex, public art, particularly art involving youth, is one of the strategies to get people's minds to open and to think about things a little differently. And this was a project over several years thinking about climate change through the lens of eating dandelions. And one of the questions we asked is, how would your life be different if food was as available as dandelions? And the shift toward getting people to be less afraid of what's mine and what I own and what I'm fundamentally extracting from, and which has been so wrapped up in the racist legacy of our culture. And instead to think about this possibility of abundance, of love, health, and regeneration. It seems like a really different accountability system. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of people eating dandelions and imagining this dandelion world together. And there were a whole number of pieces of this. And as we think about food systems, there are a lot of mechanisms that are helpful for evaluating and planning these regenerative holistic systems that Rehi and Princess are working on in such inspiring ways. But what I think is important as we go through our everyday lives is that where we see what makes food good and what makes our relationship with land good and what gives us the opportunity to celebrate and explore that is often when we eat together in places where we grow food together. This is the Rice Street Garden, Maplewood. Those are the gardeners. This is the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance giving a tour of a research project. There's a lot of research going on in the Twin Cities trying to demonstrate to the people in power all the many benefits that agriculture brings so that a chance to rebuild our relationship with the land can be part of what's normalized as healthy city. And this is a rendering, so turning around from right behind where Melvin Giles was describing this tour at Pilgrim Baptist Church, which is the seat, one of the main seats in Rondo of the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance. This is a rendering of the proposed land bridge over I-94, healing this rift in the neighborhood that was brought by the building of this highway in a really explicitly racist regime, kind of going along with redlining and the kind of differentiation of investment that we continue to see in the food system and in the urban system. And then this beautiful and expansive idea of what if a community could get a chance again? We're building new land over a highway. How would we do that differently? I think that's one of the questions we need to be asking, especially when we have opportunities like this of land where no one has that fear of loss, where there's abundance, and to say, okay, what are the relationships that we can build there? So I will leave it there and we can get more into the details when we come back into the conversation. But I just want to call out, this is at the other side of that Pilgrim Baptist when we built the hoop house there. Urban Farm and Garden Alliance is on the St. Paul side, as I think sibling project to Appetite for Change, which you get to hear about next, working alongside the Twin Cities Community Agricultural Land Trust. They're working now with this project called the Agrarian Commons, which is a national project to create local agrarian lands. And then with their collaborators in the art of food and a lot of other projects, especially right now with the expansion to include the NEFA students who have helped host us tonight. So I'll pause there.
Thanks for sharing, Valentine. And thanks for highlighting too the importance of repairing and highlighting the importance of community and the kind of unique and pivotal strategy to include our youth in our food systems. I think it's exciting work. Again, thank you for joining us. We're very grateful that you're with us tonight. That gratitude goes back to you. So thank you. Next, we would like to welcome Princess Haley. Princess, a proud Chicago native, has worked and served in Minnesota for more than 25 years. At Appetite for Change, she is a co-founder and the senior engagement officer. She has a bachelor's degree in urban teaching and specialized studies in psychology, African history, community organizing, and life coaching. Her creativity leads her to painting, writing, performing, and public speaking. Princess is passionate about creating spaces where people can find solutions to their own issues. She is a teacher, a mother, and a possibility thinker who believes that human connections are strengthened in the garden and at the cutting board and at the dinner table. Princess, we're excited that you're with us. Thanks for joining. We're wondering if you can share some insight into the concept of food is medicine.
Okay, well, thank you for introducing me and thank you all for being here. I want to start about food being medicine because I know there's been a historical trauma behind what's went on with food as well as our ideas around food. So I have a presentation that we're going to share and I have something I would like to speak as I start. So go back one slide. Back one more. Thank you. When the food is being fixed, it's power to the people. So we the people, we're the people who eat. We're the people who change. We're the people who teach. The legacy that we will reap what we sow. We are the people who have the power to change, to fix, and to grow. Just like the food, just by the food, it's why our food needs to be fixed, and our food is medicine. So my presentation today is really going to give an example of how the things that Dr. Hyman talked about in his book, identifying all of the issues and what needs to be fixed, actually happened in the community of North Minneapolis, where people used food as medicine. Next slide. So Appetite for Change started about 10 years ago, and we believe that food is the tool to create health, wealth, and social change. We came together, 3 women from 3 different backgrounds with 3 different worldviews, but we all had a vision of people having access and understanding if people had knowledge to be able to create meals and grow meals. And I know me personally as a mother who had a 16-year-old son taken by gun violence, working with young people in the community who was saying that sometimes they're not thinking right because of the food that they ate. And I was wondering if some of the decisions that young people were making was because of the food options they had in their community. We came together and we had lots of answers to the 38 fast food restaurants and the 1 grocery store that services 67,000 people, but we knew that a community who suffered the disparities also had voice and could lead us possibly to solutions. So we cooked and ate and talked with 400 community members about the change that they wanted to see, about the dreams that they wanted to dream. Next slide. And what we heard was that they liked cooking and eating and talking together. They wanted to grow food. They wanted to hold systems and policymakers accountable for the fact that there are 38 fast food restaurants in our community. They also wanted to be able to start food-based businesses. They wanted to be able to teach young people how to grow. There was all these things that we heard. And the next thing is what we could think is, what do we do now? Next slide. Could you go back to, okay. So real food for real people. We understood that what we were doing was in North Minneapolis because of the disparities, but we found out that food was the tool to connect people. Food blurs the lines. Food brings people together in that basic human need, and food will get you closer to somebody that you can find out that there's more similarities than there are differences beyond the boxes that we check, our socioeconomical status, our zip codes, and the religions that we believe in. Food can connect people. Can you click that link, the blue link? I'd like to show a video that's showing what Appetite for Change is doing now. Before you play that video, can you pause it? I'd like to ask that everybody, because we've been sitting for a while, that you can maybe show your picture or blur out your picture, but I'd like for you to stand up while you watch this video. It's only 1 minute and 30 seconds, but you can stand up, because we had to stand up towards big food. We had to stand up the government. Some young people had to stand up to their parents in the household and just say, I want to eat different food. I want to eat fresh food. So I'm asking that as we watch this video, we all stand up. Thank you. Okay, someone said there's no sound playing, so I narrate it. This is Antoine Hunter. He works in our catering team, and this is our meal box program where we're distributing meals to families so that they can cook and eat and talk at home. The program that Antoine Hunter works with is our meal distribution program. This is Savannah, one of our youth leaders, who actually helps us get those meals distributed. They were sent out via DoorDash and Street Fleet to community members. This is Eva Nairi Garrett, who started with us at Appetite for Change, was one of those 400 community members that we cooked, ate, and talked with. And I remember Nairi wasn't too interested in vegetables or food as medicine or getting her shoes dirty in the garden. And we had to meet Nairi where she was. And currently, she has vegetables growing in her backyard. She has, she created a CSA this summer. Her hair is natural. She uses food as medicine. Thank you for standing with me, and thank you for allowing me to narrate that video. You can check it out on TPT's website if you want to hear what they really said. Next slide. So what Appetite for Change did for programming after we cooked, ate, and talked with these community members, and these are a lot of the things that Mark talks about. And like, if you're taking notes and you're listening to the book, there's so many great ideas, and you might be thinking, where do I start? We started with community cooks. People said they liked cooking and eating, talking, so we did that 52 times a year, pre-COVID. Post-COVID, we created the Community Cooks Meal Box program, and we were able to deliver those fresh local items, one meal that was vegetarian and one meal that contained meat to family members. We did 117,000 meals from 2020 to 2021. And the produce that was aggregated, that was put into those boxes from local farmers, was 63,000 pounds of produce. That's $81,000 invested into local farmers. Our meal distribution program came from when the grocery store, the only grocery store we had, was actually closed after the uprising of George Floyd. And community members were coming to places like Oak Park Neighborhood Services or Brothers Empowered to get meals. Could you go back to that other slide? To get meals. And instead of us delivering meals to the community, we just created the from scratch fresh local food to be distributed to the community. And we did 370,000 meals there. There was 11,000 pounds of produce grown. And with our policy piece, Northside Fresh actually started with North Point handing over the advocacy piece to us and 36 other community partners. We were able to take our advocacy work to state and city and national levels. Tasha Powell, one of our founders, and Michelle Horvitz, one of our other founders, I believe she may be on the call, but Tasha joined the Food Council and became co-chair. She's now on the executive committee, and Ibrahim, who's one of our urban farmers, is actually on the council. And so we were a part of getting those urban agriculture, urban farming to be pushed into rent-to-own models, healthy corner stores, the staple food ordinance. Actually, last week, one of our youth, Carl, actually testified and got a chance to meet with Fu Lee about hunger-free schools. In our youth training and opportunity program, we teach all of these things about growing and cooking food and organizing and advocacy to the young people. Next slide. And then, there's so much money that's involved in food, and kind of like Ray said, not to create the revenue to drain the resources, but we have Breaking Bread Catering and Breaking Bread Cafe, which is set to be open probably sometime around June or July, and Station 81, which is in St. Paul. We believe the Twin Cities should be responsible to each other. Food should not just keep us in North Minneapolis. Food should connect us to the broader parts of Minnesota, as well as other countries, because we are the people who need the food. And then we have our West Broadway Farmers Market, where we're aggregating produce from other farmers who may not have the time to come to market, but we're doing everything that we can to make sure that people in our community have access to fresh and local food. Next slide. So to eat or not to eat, sometimes that's the question. Sometimes people will say, well, you shouldn't eat ramen noodles. And when you're meeting a community where they are and their food needs, sometimes to eat those ramen noodles is better than not to eat nothing. So we talk to people and train them or ask them questions about their relationship with food, and find out how you can take what you're eating, which is like what my daughter calls piece food. You eat a piece of what you know you should eat, you eat a piece of what you're used to eating, and then you're at peace in your mind about it. The food connects us to culture, and culture is impacted by the environment. We're asking those questions, getting people to build a relationship with food, because there is some trauma around food. That's where sometimes those food insecurities come from. We're asking people what change would they like to see. And when you're individually striving to have this change with food in your life, your social circle, just like that story I told about Nairi, she was my social circle. In the beginning, she wasn't interested, but after seeing me eat better, after seeing me grow food, after seeing how happy I was, even after the loss of my son, Nairi understood and wasn't afraid to be a part of the same social circle that was able to grow her own food and now fight against the system to ask the system for change. So that change happens individually, socially, and systemically, we believe, but not in one linear order. It all kind of has to happen at one time. Next slide. So the food fix, there's so many different areas that Dr. Hyman talked about us working on and changing, but I believe that each person wakes up and we have to be radical about our self-care, just like Audre Lorde said. And I believe that self-care happens in the kitchen, waking up and making sure you're hydrated, you're having your herbs, and you're handling your hygiene, so that you can feel capable to be able to change the food system for next people. And that change looks like something different for everybody. So that personal liberation from the system. I can grow food in front of my house and I still have to go to the grocery store. I'm not as blessed enough to live in Northville with Rehi. Me and my husband, if Rehi's inviting us, we're willing to come. But until I can get there, what small steps can I take? And do I call them all small steps? But what steps can I take to be able to make sure that if the grocery store is closed and the trucks don't roll in, that I can feed my family? Next slide. Well, we're open to always connecting, always partnering, even if it's that 5th grader from Lucy Laney who wants to ask me what's my favorite thing to grow in a garden, to college students, to whoever you are that is visiting us from Hawaii. I'd love to chat. This is our website and our social media connections. So you can screenshot those if you'd like to. We'd love to hear your food story at Appetite for Change. Next slide. And if you want to talk to me personally, I can be reached. This is my website and this is my phone number. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Princess, for introducing us to Appetite for Change and highlighting how our relationship with food can lead to health, wealth, and social change. I would like to thank all of our panelists today, Reiki, Valentine, and Princess. We're very grateful that you were able to join us today. One of the main things that sticks out to me from all of the panelists was kind of the common theme about community. So as we're building community tonight, I'm hopeful for the future as we can build more collaborations and relationships with community. With that, I would like to pass it off to Karina, who will discuss important action items and next steps that we can take in advocacy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again to Rahi, Valentine, and Princess for all of the wonderful information you shared with us and all of the work that you're doing. Just to move us into a little bit of advocacy. So Rahi and Valentine and Princess all touched on a lot of great opportunities for advocacy. So we've just linked them all here in this graphic that we will be sending out to you all later. We also have an opportunity by the Land Stewardship Project. They've got a petition for soil farming health in Minnesota, super quick and easy. And then we've also got a few things here, just some socially minded everyday actions that will keep justice for our earth and each other in mind. So they're just here for you to try, see how they feel, how they work in your life. Additionally, we also we invite you to consider joining the CSJ Earth Partners Working Group. It's an intergenerational group raising awareness of the interconnectedness of all creation and changing behavior individually and collectively for the life of the planet. So you can email Jennifer Tashney if you are interested in getting involved with any of their projects. If you are interested in learning about the ins and outs of advocacy and ways to be an advocate, you can email myself, Ashley Lopez, or Marty Rowers about doing a lab training. There's also a companion bill called For the People Act, which focuses on election reform, making it easier rather than harder to vote, ending the dominance of big money in our politics, and ensuring public officials work for the public interest. So the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph are putting together an effort to help get this passed. So consider checking this out and supporting it so that we can all have the chance to voice what matters the most to us, like food justice and climate justice, and support those who are willing to represent us as change makers in this world. And then finally, Earth Week is coming soon. We have some really exciting events coming up that are all posted on our website. Among them is the Earth Week virtual 5K St. Paul Bee Run Walk Bike, which is happening the week of April 17th to the 24th. And yes, so I know I just mentioned a lot, but these will all be sent out to you later in the resource guide that was mentioned before. That will include all of this as well as the Food Fix advocacy guide. So thank you again to everyone for being here, and I'm going to pass it off to Erica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Karina. We're now going to move into a Q&A session based on the panelists. If you have questions, just send them in the chat. I do have one prepared, but we'll be watching for your questions. I saw a really thought-provoking experience by Michael Gurahan. He said, in my advocacy, I'm trying to get a large Catholic organization to stop giving out sugary treats to raise money. Instead, giving out healthier choices, and they won't change this because much money is involved. And we all like our sweets, but I think this is all something that we experience within our own communities. And this was thought-provoking to me because like within hospitals, I'll see this, that there's unhealthy treats and you want to speak out. So my question to our panelists was, how do we get this conversation started within our communities, and what are steps and actions that we can take? And how could Michael address this situation as well?
I can start if that's okay. Okay. Within my recent studies around trauma-informed nutrition have led me to believe that there's so much around food shaming, and there's so much to understand that these sugary treats often offer us that place of comfort. And so really asking the good questions around, well, what are we planning on giving out to raise funds? Is it sugary treats? Are there any other options? How does it make you feel? What kind of treats were you given around celebrations or holidays? Like really getting people to think about their thinking around what they're choosing to do. And then because we have to meet people where they are and like think about a lot of the celebrations, they all have candy related to them. So or those sugary treats related to them. So I'm always just really mindful of asking people those questions. And even when they ingest it, how they feel, because sometimes just that sugar makes you feel so good, but then there's that crash. Getting people to experience or acknowledge what they're experiencing when they choose that as an option to give to other people, or when they ingest it themselves, will often lead them to some type of change. And then offering those fresh and local options. I would like to hear what Rehi and Valentine would have to say also, because I'm still learning.
I love the idea you said about like a piece, like eating a piece of the thing that's good, because I think it helps people, yeah, as you said, like not give up all the foods that they associate with care and love and relationship. One of the things that really strikes me, and this is something that Rehi's farming has also inspired in me, is something that I think is really powerful that we sometimes overlook in bringing food, particularly into the landscape of urban places, is giving everybody the experience of just radical abundance. So like, you know, we might like to eat a Tootsie Roll, but like there's never, I don't know, I've never had a day, I love Tootsie Rolls, full disclosure, but I've never had a day where I wanted to eat like all the Tootsie Rolls. Whereas working on the Hamlin campus, there are June berries that grow all over campus, and I can eat a tremendous number of June berries, and it does not make me feel bad, and I can never put a dent in them. And all the students picking at the same time, and all the birds picking from the top, there's always more than enough. And I've gained the sense, and working in food distributions and in many settings where, especially for those of us for whom food access has ever been an issue, to have a place where there's this abundance of something you can eat as much as you want and it will just still be good. And that you don't even have to think like I need to pick all of this, because you just can't. That's so good for the soul.
We have a lot of things like that. It's not just about Tootsie Rolls, it's a whole thing. But here's what I see. Growing up, we used to grow sugarcane. We did it for our sugar and for the coffee and for everything else that needed sugar, for the squash, for the preserves, for the conservas, as we used to call them. And the Day of the Dead was the most amazing day of the year because we had all of these sweet treats. Also, if we were scurvy, there were 13 of us, and my mother was having trouble keeping us from whatever it is that we're doing. She would take the hunk of panela and just chop a corner and give us each a piece so we could go and have energy to go play instead of bothering her. Right? There is a culture of treats, of having that. Now, what happened? Where did it go wrong? Well, everything pretty much about our food went wrong when long-held ancestral cultures and traditions that used to actually keep us together. The whole process of producing panela out of sugarcane was a community effort. And it became this thing that we not only sold, but also used as a way to celebrate little gatherings, to have those treats. Then comes the colonizing system and realizes, well, they can manufacture that stuff and then bring it back to us. And then they interrupted the whole process, the whole culture that was part of doing that. It also destroyed our connection to the process that gave us the treats. This is no different than you finding mac and cheese. Or, I mean, if we're gonna think that way, we really have to make a list. And it's, according to Michael Pollan, it's about 250,000 items long that fit the same exact profile. The problem wasn't the treats. The problem is in the sweets. The problem is the way we have colonized everything, brought it back around, and then use it through corporate systems to extract more wealth out of our communities by colonizing, appropriating the culture, and turning it into something that it was not meant to be. This is where we went wrong. We went wrong like that everywhere. It's the way we think about stuff. And so we think about the money the same way we think about the solutions. We are departing from the same framework, trying to fix what's wrong. And that's what gets us the wrong results. That's why we don't normally fail at processing these kinds of, very deep questions like, yeah, I mean, but if you think of it, the institutionalization of cultural appropriation and cultural expropriation and colonization, the Catholic Church is probably the biggest culprit across the world, because it was used as a way to achieve those goals, to eliminate cultures, to shame people from doing this and that, and even brought games into communities, which then became, a lot of the bingo. Bingo was part of that process of appropriating traditions that people used in the communities. It's just too much. It is not something, I mean, again, intellectually, I think we're just now finally beginning to just get scratching the surface of the tragedy of the food commons. And the tragedy of it is that it was invaded, colonized, expropriated, appropriated, taken away, and then sold back to us. That's where we went wrong. And that's what we need to bring back. That's what the foundation of regenerative thinking is. But to do that, we first have to decolonize the process, methodology, the science we use, and then indigenize the mind so we don't make the same mistakes again. And it is totally possible to be a steward of energy transformation and management and all of that. We are practicing it. We always practice that. That's what taught us the most about solving these very big issues. And yeah, we now are part of, right now we are 6 farms. All of them are part of the tree range poultry system, but we are bringing together 14 different enterprise sectors, and we are eager to engage with other enterprises, social enterprises in the Twin Cities and other urban areas, so that we can then rebuild the supply, from the farm all the way to the table. But it's not like a single organization. We need to become ecosystem managers, part of an ecosystem where everybody does their part. And as a result of everybody doing their part, we decolonize the supply chain from the farm to the table and put the treats back on the table. I want those treats. I don't want to get rid of them. I just want them to come to me and to my kids with the integrity that I grew up with. Is that too much to ask?
I really like
No.
this framing of integrity. Jennifer, were you going to jump in?
Go ahead with your response, Valentine, and then I'll ask another question from the chat.
I was just thinking about Clara's question about the sustainable food system with capitalism. And I thought that was a really good segue from Rehi's question about integrity. And I highly recommend, there's a book called The History of the World and 7 Cheap Things that covers some of those dynamics very quickly of how we have cheapened food and labor and land and our relationships. And I think it's just really worth acknowledging, especially in the communities where we're trying to build anti-racist and equity-based advocacy. The food system is one of the most glaring examples we have of a racialized hierarchy of labor, and where people have been treated as if they didn't matter as much. And we would not have systems where people were treated the way they are treated in food processing, in growing vegetables and meats, and just the whole system. And if in every act of nourishment, we had a sense of reciprocity, and that we weren't eating anything that we didn't feel like we had the capacity to repair any harms that it was creating, we would eat really differently. And so yeah, I'm not hopeful for, the problem is that capitalism really presses us to those kinds of discounting. And I also don't think that, within a very quick period of time, we're going to transform it. But I think that we could heavily hold it accountable in a really different way, so that if we recognized left to its own devices, it's going to be incredibly extractive. And to say food is something that maybe shouldn't live in that domain. Like it's a good starting place to say 90% of the food interactions we have are in the economic relations that aren't capitalist. We don't feed our children through capitalism. We don't feed our neighbors through capitalism. And so when people kind of defend it, like, well, we need the market for this, it's like, well, we already get along, like in the places where people are being fed, we're not actually reliant on capitalism. And to expand that space, we might see a little bit less of the damage that capitalism does.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Sorry, Rehi, I see the system that you're working with seems to be working with capitalism, or trying to. I mean, what is your response to that question about sustainable food systems and capitalism?
Very good question there. Here's what I would say. If we ever have capitalism, it will work. What we have is not capitalism. In the name of opposing governmental totalitarianism on the other side of the world, we imposed on the US population and most of the world a corporate totalitarianism. Now, the problem is that it's invisible, like colonization. The extraction, the power, the systems that generate the kind of discrepancies that we have now as a result of what we have supported, that's not capitalism. It was not intended to do that. Capitalism is closer to a social system where all of the demand and supply of something is balanced out so that everybody can have access to. That's really the foundation of capitalist theory, not what we have today. What we have today is a manipulated process by which a few corporations and few individuals are allowed to determine the rules of the game so that everybody else has to stay out of the game. So we don't even have to get a chance to play in the game. That was not capitalism. That is called totalitarianism. It's just that instead of, we rebuked the other side of the world that wanted to impose a government-based totalitarian system, and we then ushered in a corporate totalitarianism based on white supremacy. That is what the problem is. That's what delivered us what we have today, not capitalism, not the original theory of capitalism. So yes, we are using the fundamentals of economic theory and economic development that where we started from with that original sense of integrity. If you look at the organic system, it's the same thing. The people who created I4M and all of that, they had an original idea of really meeting the needs of communities for food and the ability of the landscape to produce it in a way that it was not degenerative to the other living systems. And yet it was, again, co-opted and then appropriated by the corporate totalitarian system, and then moved it into this other space that I don't recognize as capitalism, at least, and a lot of us don't anymore. And so what we are applying is the fundamentals of social enterprise design, which ensures that steward ownership is the center of how benefits, risks are distributed. And so we are all owners, and we are all taking risks, and we are all part of the whole process. And that is now, if you look through, there's a whole new sector that is emerging that is more based on the original concept of capitalism, and which was more in alignment with what we call now social enterprise design. So steward-owned ecosystems. So what we are building is ecosystems, not companies. And then that ecosystem is owned, controlled, and especially governed by the different affinity groups, in this case, that are participating in creating value, also taking the risks, and also creating the benefits in the process. But the beauty of that is that the profit, the governing structures of those systems, in this case, the benefit corporation, steward-owned benefit corporation under what is called the purpose economy, those systems are actually governed by by councils that have no economic interest in the actual system that they govern, but they have 100% of the control and ownership. And everybody else who risks their capital, for example, gets a return on investment that is more in alignment with the very capacity of the system to produce those results without exploitation and without degeneration of the landscape. That's the capitalism we are using, yes, but don't confuse us with what you see out there that Bill Gates and all of those people practice. That's not capitalism, that's totalitarianism.
And if I can just add to that, what we found when I learned a lot. I'm learning so much just listening, so that I can be able to have these conversations when we're cooking, eating, and talking with community members. But when you're enduring the trauma and you're not eating well, and you just don't see an out, because the best way you can be healthy in your community is to just like run past the 38 fast food restaurants in your community. That'll get your exercise in, and then you're not stopping at one of the places to eat any of the food. But as when Rehi separated the idea of capitalism and actually what we're really being oppressed by, people often, in my community, my experience is that people often hear those words and they kind of glaze over. And so if we say real food for real people, like, it's great to have that understanding for when you're doing your advocacy work and when you're fighting out, and especially talking to groups that are putting in and process a large system like you are, Rehi. But sometimes when you get down in the dirt with the people who are like, I don't like leeks, and you're just trying to get them to understand you don't know leeks, and I'm going to let you cook leeks with me so that you can see that leeks is like, what does it look like? It just looks like a bigger green onion, and let's taste it and let's eat it. We found out that the word healthy was off-putting to members of the Black community because it came with this judgment and something that was so unattainable based on what we've heard about being a Black. I can only speak from being a Black woman. I don't know if any of you noticed, but I'm a Black woman. That was a joke. I'm sorry. But in being a Black woman, I'm told that I'm going to have high blood pressure. I'm going to have diabetes. I'm going to have 10 number one killers. It's going to be my husband. It's going to be HIV. It's going to be hypertension. It's going to be breast cancer. I'm like, can you pick one? So to hear all that and to try to often understand in the baby stages how capitalism or socialism or a vegetarian or vegan or flexitarian or pescatarian, like all of those words, like sometimes make it so challenging when I can just get a person to understand that when the government said with the food pyramid, eat your fruits and vegetables, that they didn't say eat your proteins and grains. So if you eat fruits, you can't check that box off because you still need to consume vegetables. And you probably need to consume more vegetables than anything. And how do you feel when you consume vegetables? And what vegetables do you know? Like, have you heard of bok choy? Like, hey, you know what I mean? Or the only vegetables you eat collard greens, and you boil them all, you boil them too much. And then you can tell me that in your culture, the African tradition, that to boil the green really soft is good. And a doctor might say, but you're boiling all of the nutrients out. But the person will tell me that they drink the pot liquor. So they drink that juice that they've boiled from it, but they boil it really soft so that normally they can eat it with their hands. So within the culture, you have to kind of accept each person and meet them where they are. And then once you start to feed them better food, the internal environment changes. And then when that internal environment changes and they start to ask those questions back, then I can teach them about the system. I can teach them about the structures, and then they can go and fight for policy, systems, and environmental changes with me. Thank you for listening.
Can I add one little tiny nugget that has kept me going so much? So this is a gift from Dominique Diaga-Cash, now with the Sierra Club. He was with the American Friends Service Committee when he taught me this. He said, Valentine, you've got to work 75% on the economy that you're bringing into being. I think this is a People Institute idea. And 25% on the system you're trying to bring down. And I feel like Princess, this is what I so hear is we have to nourish each other and make it okay for us to keep going back and fighting the system that is targeting our neighborhoods and making money off of people and not making them healthy. But we have to do it in this loving and nourishing way, so we aren't sending people, right, that cringing, like when we ask people what they want to eat and they like I don't want to tell you because you're going to judge me. You're like, no, it's good. Like whatever it is, it's good. And piece by piece, we can make it what we need.
Thank you, panelists. Those are some awesome answers. And we have just like 2 or 3 minutes. And I want to just pop one question in quick. Where are the food fix related efforts in the Twin Cities that need the most hands-on deck right now? And maybe just 1 or 2 minutes per panelist of things in the Twin Cities that need some extra help right now. And then we'll move into our closing piece.
I'm not in the Twin Cities, so I'll skip that. I'll yield my time to Valentine and Princess.
And I'll be quick because we only have a few minutes, but at Appetite for Change, I will say, and I believe they shared our policy and advocacy fix so that we're asking people to contact your legislator around hunger-free schools. At Appetite for Change specifically, we are putting together our volunteer engagement model with safe social distancing. I am thinking that we're probably going to be hosting some people in the garden because the garden and the land is healing. I also know that we're looking to raise enough funds to continue our meal box distribution program. So if people know of businesses or corporations that are interested in hearing a presentation similar to this one, or are hosting a 5K and want to talk about self-care being the most revolutionary act and it happening in the kitchen, I'm open to speak. You can reach out to me personally and we can just tailor something to meet the needs. Like, of what people have to offer. But I will say that our meal boxes, because it's important for a mother to get up and cook in the kitchen with her family. And we found that after COVID and after the murder of George Floyd, that women were not doing that. I was like, please go home and go to the store and get purple cabbages. And all of the produce was there, but the shelf stable food was gone. So getting fresh and local and real food back into the homes of real people with safe social distancing is our focus right now at Appetite for Change. Thank you for listening.
And I'll just add, I think land is the basis of liberation, and we could really use people who want to be involved in the conversations about what it takes to have more land available. So like really recognizing that it's not a zero-sum game between land for food and land for housing. We need it all together, but we need to make sure that we're not making people only have to come all the way out to Rahi's to be able to connect to the land. And a lot of that work, we will, like Princess said, we will do a lot of tours with TCALT this summer to get people into the gardens. And some of it is wonky policy work. And it's just kind of going around to the county commissioners and continuing to explain this is not like in the interim until we develop every square inch. It's part of what we want to see in the city in the long term. I'm just going to also have my other hat on that, like this wonderful higher ed network that's working together that's been mentioned. I think that there's a real space for building out the Farm Bill, the kinds of supports that we currently have to get free lunch to everybody, to have that be extended beyond the 12th grade. So I think the other place that we really could use folks is building up the conversation of why has the food assistance program been so successful, and kind of pushing back on this idea that entitlements are a waste of money. They're a huge benefit to our society, and to expand to those and to make sure that basic needs are a floor, that everybody gets fed. And then, you know, beyond that, we can have markets.
Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you for all the work that you do to build a healthier food system. It's a lot of information, and you know, we've got to come together more often around this, because this is the way we're going to do the work, is if we work together. So thank you so much for all that you shared. Thank you to all the participants and for the great ideas shared in the chat and for the work you're doing, like, you know, and the ideas such as perhaps the Girl Scouts could sell seeds rather than cookies, and ideas and suggestions around growing as much food as you can and sharing it in your local food shelves, because yes, they take it and they want it, and they want as many tomatoes as you can grow, and so people can engage in ways that are possible to help create a healthier food system. And so I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who was on the planning committee and the people that helped with tech tonight. I want to thank you all for being here, and especially thank our panelists for their work. And we're just going to take a few minutes upon leaving for a closing reflection. And then again, we will take the chat comments and questions and all the resources shared tonight, which there were many, and we will collate those, we'll put them together into a document, and we'll share it out with all of you. And hopefully there will be another opportunity to come together again around some of these projects and learnings, so that we can keep each other going and keep this good work moving forward. I'll turn it over to Karina.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you to everyone for being here and for engaging with us. It's been a real honor to be here with you all with this event. And I hope you're all able to go into the rest of your night and in the following days with some of the great inspiration and the passion that was displayed here, and also the hope that is typically created in spaces like these. So to just gather ourselves back to each other before we go forth, I will be sharing a poem by Nancy Willard, and may it be a reminder of the immense beauty and vast mystery of even that which appears to be the most simple to us. This is titled A Zen Prayer for Preparing a Meal, How to Stuff a Pepper. Take your green pepper and gently for peppers are shy, somersaults and parsley of the days when the sexes were one. Slash open the sleeve as if you were cutting a paper lantern, and enter a moon spilled like a melon, a fever of pearls, a conversation of glaciers. It is a temple built to the worship of morning light. I have sat under the great globe of seeds on the roof of that chamber, too dazzled to gather the taste I came for. I have taken the pepper in hand, smooth and blind, a runt in the rich evolution of roses and ferns. You say I have not yet taught you to stuff a pepper? Cooking takes time. Next time, we'll consider the rice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful evening.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, and all.
We'll share that poem, we'll share the poetry in the follow-up email as well. Feel free to unmute as you're leaving if you wish.
I just had a quick question as everybody's trickling out through the chat, if there's time for that. And I asked this in the chat. I was wondering, I wasn't quite quick enough to grab a screenshot when Princess shared their contact information and website at the end of that PowerPoint presentation. Are you planning to also share that in the after meeting notes, Jennifer?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And Jasper, Princess has just put it back in the chat.
Thank you for drawing my attention to that.
Can't leave. I'm still here. Like I had so much fun. I'm like, hey.
Hey, Princess.
Hey.
I maybe
Hey, Valentine.
I maybe missed it if other panelists shared their information too. So if that's in the after meeting notes, I'll definitely grab it from there. Thank you, everyone who shared your journey and your story and the inspiring stories that you have. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. I suppose I should say, hey, Rahim.
Diane, you sound like you have a hilarious filter on.
Actually, I don't. I'll have to tell you about it some other time.
Here, now it sounds normal.
You know, wine does help, I have to tell you. It's been a day. And I do need to talk to you too, just because.
Agreed.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peace.
Yeah, that is the Mary Tashney there, Ellen. Mary, there's a student, Ellen Heestand is a graduate of Totino Grace. Can you unmute yourself if you're there, Mary?
We might have just missed her. No. There we go.
You wanna? Oh, were you gonna stop the recording, Jennifer, or are you meaning to record all this?
Oh, sure, I'll stop it. Okay.
I'm not finding